The vernacular data in Indian languages is about 8 to 10 times the data available in Sanskrit, because vernacular language, whatever data is available in Sanskrit has been retold. For example, Ramayana, if you take, it might be one Ramayana in Sanskrit, Valmiki, but in Kannada you will have 10 different versions of that. But unfortunately, our school curriculum still sticks to that European established one, and later adds as a footnote, this was discovered by Aryabhata 1,000 years earlier. It's not 100 years lead, it's a 1,000-year lead. Why are we not converting that 1,000-year lead into actual starting point of our textbooks? Ramakrishna Mutt had the copies of 1895 to 1914, they had 20 volumes of Brahmavadin, a magazine which. And after our seeing our digitization work and all that, the Swamijis of that Chennai Mutt gave me the entire bundle and said, if you open it once, that's it. Nobody else can open it again because it will all crumble. So you take it and do whatever you can.
Namaste. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. C.S. Yogananda with us, who is going to talk about decolonizing educational systems in India with a special focus on preserving and conserving Indian manuscript traditions. He is very interested in the interface of mathematics and technology and has contributed to many IT tools for Indian languages. He is involved in the creation and maintenance of the portals such as Advaita Sharda Shringeri. He was a founder editor of Samasya, a tri-annual journal for school students, and was a member of the editorial board of Resonance, a journal for science education published from the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore. He is the author of several research and survey articles in various journals, and besides mathematics, he is interested in classical music and mountaineering. Namaste, sir. How far do you think we have come in decolonizing our education system since independence, and what are the areas that still remain deeply colonized?
One of the first thing which any keen observer would notice is that to get out of the decolonization, we have to get out of the current educational mode, and especially the source of our textbooks. So now it's mainly confined to after school, it's English, and mainly based on the English scholars. That I see as a tragedy. So unless we get out of that, we cannot decolonize, because that all is them. So what is paradoxical is, let's say for example, we talk about the Vijayanagara Empire, which was in Karnataka, which was an extraordinarily reputed empire. But then now if you want to study about that, your sources are Cambridge University textbooks written by English people. And how did they do it? They came to India and they looked at, because nothing is there written in English earlier. So they came to India, looked at the sources which were in vernacular languages. Then they went back and their interpretation of that vernacular language in English is what is existing now. If you are now going to read that textbooks, how are you going to get the original view? It's already colored because translation from a local language into English, and by a person who was not aware of the local situation. So first decolonization should happen by preparing books by Indians and based on Indian sources, local sources. Okay, so this brings us to the problem of making the local sources available to everyone, scholar. So that's the next step, which is digitization of old manuscripts, books, and inscriptions. I would go in, the order would be, it would be old books, then manuscripts, then inscriptions. They can parallelly also, they can be. That's the area. So that brings us to this digitization of various things of this kind. And for example, let me talk about the digitization of old books. So I have this thing that we should digitize all vernacular books published in India till about 100 years ago, 80 to 100 years ago. So that itself is a very huge number. And why 80 years ago? One simple thing is that the books published 80 years ago are completely out of the copyright domain. So they are public knowledge. So this public knowledge, let's make it public. Instead of confining them to some one or two copies of the book available in some vague library in some distant place which nobody has access to, let's put it out in the public this thing so that everybody can study that. So I think that would be the first step, and that will itself give people enough thought thing to think about. And then after that they will themselves go after the next. So because the books would have said, okay, the manuscripts are available here, I based it on manuscripts. So if you are not very satisfied or if you have a doubt, now you go on in search of the manuscripts and then inscriptions. So I think this is the starting point, making the books published before 80 years, let's say, available on a public platform in a neat way. So actually the big Western digital archive started with this idea, therefore they wanted to grab knowledge. They're usually 10 years ahead of the thing. Their plan and their vision is very long. So Hathi Trust and all those had huge. Now they are reaping the benefits of that for making the language models and all. So if we don't correct this, then we will only be studying our history through their eyes and their thoughts. So decolonization for the first step would be making knowledge available in Indian languages as it is. That's the first step.
What are the biggest obstacles, intellectual, political, or societal, to decolonizing education today, in your view?
Frankly speaking, I don't think there is any. No, even if there are political hurdles, etc., the popular will just prevail. But it's not prevailing because it's not accessible. So once these books are available, then who can prevent them from studying? No government force will prevent them from studying. So that's all what I am saying. You make them available first, and then you will see the effect that people will naturally start looking. Because even we today, we hear something, if we don't agree with it, we go to Google, search it, and then check whether that interpretation was right or some other text is there, etc. So if our texts are completely hidden from that view, then we will not get it. So my this thing is, you don't have to worry about the political or any other this thing, but make this available openly in a public way, and lot of things will auto-correct by themselves. As I said, then that hunger for manuscripts, hunger for inscriptions, taking interest in the local thing, talking to local people will naturally develop. Now there is no need for that because no English book will tell you go to this place, look for this book in Kannada which was published in 1830 and read from there, or these manuscripts are available, because they have digested themselves as per their thing and been given it. So they will only give references of their works. So if we start doing this, books of 8 years without any this thing, principle, every, and then you can classify it about subjects, etc., and carry on. Otherwise, we will completely lose the vernacular language thing. It is very, very rich. Even today, it is very rich. In fact, many people, couple of are of the opinion that the vernacular data in Indian languages is about 8 to 10 times the data available in Sanskrit. Because vernacular language, whatever data is available in Sanskrit has been retold. For example, Ramayana, if you take, it might be one Ramayana in Sanskrit, Valmiki. But in Kannada, you will have 10 different versions of that. In Tamil, you will have 10 different versions of that. In Punjabi, you will have 10 different versions. So the amount of knowledge that's already available is huge in vernacular language. So first step in decolonization is to make these things available publicly. So we have done some small experiments with respect to Kannada, because there was a person who was picking up some old book, writing about it and publishing it in a regular column in a newspaper. So we talked to that person. Whenever he talked about it, that particular book was scanned and made available here along with this article. So like that, we have about 100 books kind of thing. And that itself is quite revealing. And these are original sources. I think if we do this, because the entry of English in a big way in our education, I would say is 100 to 120 years. So 100 years ago also it was slow, and before that it was not there at all. So if you wanted to study Vijayanagar Empire 150 years ago, your recourse was only local material. You did not have Cambridge University books. So now that is the only thing available. Then how do you decolonize yourself?
How can pedagogy itself be decolonized, especially in ways that emphasize experiential learning, dialogue, which is samvad, and critical thinking rather than rote memorization?
See, here again, in my experience, I found especially during the COVID, it was amusing to witness that. So the classes stopped and everything went online. And I would, without any hesitation, say the one subject which really benefited by this was Sanskrit. Because Sanskrit was the language and the way it is taught in a traditional way is very much rooted to the Shruti Parampara, hearing and listening. So online they were able to do this in a very effective way, and I think, it might be a good sociology experiment to see the impact after the COVID years. So that shows our Gurukula system of studying in a holistic way is the better one. In fact, a couple of days ago, I was at the JNU conference of the Indian Knowledge Systems, and I was talking to Dr. Ram Subramaniam, who is a scholar in Sanskrit and science. He is a PhD in physics and is a very deep Sanskrit scholar. So two young girls or ladies walked up to him and said, "We are doing PhD in Sanskrit, MA in Sanskrit." And then he started talking to them. And this was in action. The Gurukula, because they had learned through Gurukula, so he could quiz them and talk to them and ask them questions. They were able to reply and answer. Half an hour of wonderful thing. I should confess, I am a mathematics professor. I have not been able to have this kind of conversation with many people. Our Olympiad students were, of course, exceptional, and with them I could relate another. So I think this Gurukula kind of education system is what is to be propagated, as opposed to this subject syllabus and then breaking that syllabus into pieces to be studied in different years is not the correct way of this thing. So somehow we have to make this pedagogical thing of our Gurukula system into the mainstream thing. So in fact, ever since that conversation and similar but a few months ago, I have been thinking of, can we do that, for example, linear algebra or number theory? Can I introduce it in a Gurukula system way where we don't say this is point 1, point 2, point 3 syllabus, this you only study. Instead of that, you put the subject and then whatever is required to understand the subject also you learn, which is the Gurukula system. I think that will be a very great step in the pedagogical direction.
What is the danger of replacing colonial content with token symbols of Indian culture without transforming the epistemological foundations?
See, what you pointed out is very right. I will give you a very quick example. Trigonometry, the way we study in schools, is from the 15th century onwards, 15th or 16th century. And even today, the world acknowledges that trigonometry started in India with the work of Aryabhata in the 5th century, Aryabhatiyam. It has been established beyond doubt that that was the starting point of trigonometry. And many major developments have taken place from 5th century up to the 15th, 16th century in India itself, especially the Kerala School of Mathematics. But unfortunately, our school curriculum still sticks to that European established one, and later adds as a footnote, this was discovered by Aryabhata 1,000 years earlier. It's not 100 years lead, it's a 1,000 year lead. Why are we not converting that 1,000 year lead into actual starting point of our textbooks? That we need to do. So just instead of footnotes of history, and believe me, that is a more natural way of introducing trigonometry than the existing one via triangles. So I've been thinking about actually converting this into a textbook kind of thing, starting from Aryabhata and then writing the trigonometry thing. It is definitely possible. And again, but the problem is the same again. So once Aryabhata, then there are a lot of commentaries on Aryabhatiyam, which contains a lot of material and further developments. And if I want to look into them and study, it's not available because they're all in some old, forgotten books published somewhere, hiding in some library. So first bring them out, put them on the public platform, we have access. Then I can look at Aryabhata, start from the trigonometry from his Aryabhatiyam, and then develop going through, reading through various manuscripts and this Kerala School of Mathematics. And then we will have a nice trigonometry book, which does not say Aryabhata discovered it 1,000 years earlier than this one. So that is something very important.
In your view, why were Indian manuscript traditions largely excluded or undervalued in colonial and post colonial curriculums, and how can we begin to reverse that?
I'll tell you a very interesting thing, this one. And these days, of course, the language has been a very big problematic issue now. In 1920s and 30s, so our Nittur Srinivas Rao, was one of the retired Chief Justice of the Karnataka High Court, he once commented when these protests were happening that the language in court should be Kannada, the medium of judgment, or the argument should be Kannada. He said, I find it amusing because when I started my practice, that was the situation. I mean, arguments were happening in Kannada, judgments were written in Kannada and kept. So, what changed that situation? To the extent that these days we have to have strong protests to bring Kannada back into the court. It's a very interesting thing. It was a technology problem. What changed the matters was the invention of the typewriter. The typewriter came because what happens is when you argue and the judge has to give his judgment, dictates it and somebody writes it. And then that is to be preserved. So courts employed what are called writers. Police stations, courts had writers because it has to be preserved so others have to read, so it has to be good handwriting. So people with good handwriting, scribes or writers they were called. That was a position in the court as well as in the police stations, writer. So they used to write. And when typewriter came, it made the situation so easy for English. They said now, if you want to write something, legibility is not at all an issue. You don't have to look for specialized set of people who can write well. Now anybody can learn typing and he can type and it will be legible for the next generation. So the English typewriter which was invented, that came and they found it very easy to type judgments and then also make copies, which was not easy earlier. If you want 2 copies of the judgment, 2 people had to write. Now with the discovery of the carbon copy and this typewriter, you can make 3 copies at the same time. So this single thing, so for first few years apparently the judgments were given in Kannada, then translated to English, typed and kept. After that they removed they started giving it directly in English and this thing, Kannada went out of the court. So by that time people wanted a Kannada typewriter similar to what English does, similar typewriter machine for Kannada. Another 40-50 years had elapsed, the freedom had come. Karnataka, there is a very well recorded history of the Kannada typewriter and its problems, etc. So this technology invention, whenever there is a development in technology, it has to seep into local languages. Otherwise, the language has a problem of getting left behind. Because, for example, now AI, if we don't get our data in, we will be left behind. That's the point. So that's a very important thing that it was there, our languages were there, they were being used. But these technology interventions, when they come, we have to definitely put some efforts and bring that technology development to our things. So this is where when I started Sriranga Digital Technologies, in the background of all this this thing I had gathered, studies I had made, started Sriranga Digital Technology with one line theme, to bring the fruits of technology to Indian languages.
How can we move beyond treating manuscripts merely as cultural artifacts, which is something that concerns archivists and historians today, and begin using them as living sources of pedagogy and research?
This is the correct one. We would like to, but they are being treated as artifacts because they are very delicate to handle. Now, thanks to digitization, that problem is solved. So, you digitize that, then any number of people can. Because, for example, Ramakrishna Mutt had the copies of 1895 to 1914, they had 20 volumes of Brahmavadin, a magazine which. And after our seeing our digitization work and all that, the Swamiji's of that Chennai Mutt gave me the entire bundle and said, if you open it once, that's it. Nobody else can open it again because it all crumble. So you take it and do whatever you can. So that's the problem. If you have a digitized copy, then 100 people can study it sitting from wherever without damaging the original. So that's important. So once you digitize and make it available, then this artifact thing goes away. So I can also look at it, what's your, otherwise you have to take special permission, you'll have to be instructed how to delicately handle it and things like that. You have to be very careful. So digitization will solve that problem.
Can India position itself globally as a civilizational knowledge hub by recentering its manuscript traditions? And in your view, what are the institutional or policy shifts that are required for this?
India did very well with the putting in place the National Manuscript Mission, but it had to be complemented by whatever has been gathered, organize it and make it available. So that organizing that collection and then making it accessible is lacking. So once if the government, and this has to be done by the government because the numbers are very huge and it's not a return on investment kind of situation. So this has to be done by the government. So to complementing the National Manuscript Mission efforts, there needs to be a agency effort which will organize this, put them on a big server, make it accessible, and then make it available. I mean, in a various way. I mean, you have to catalog them and give some metadata, details, etc., so that people looking out for it will find them. So, in that sense, that is the governmental policy or governmental effort that is required in this. Organizing these manuscripts already digitized, putting it in a platform with metadata to be made available to people, and then a panel of transcribers, because these are in various scripts, Nandinagari, Sharda, Tigalari, Devanagari, etc. So we had to empanel a team of transcribers to do that. Then they can catalog and make available any particular manuscript.
By 2047, when India will complete its 100 years of independence, what would a decolonized Indian classroom look like? Particularly one which is rooted in manuscript traditions and indigenous knowledge systems in their truest sense.
Yeah, no, manuscript thing, after whatever I have said so far, the pedagogical, that is all done. But if you're projecting to 2047, by that time all these things are in place and this becomes common knowledge. You go to this thing, if you want to look for something, there's books available, manuscripts available from the regional data, regional language, regional traditions, that data, then it becomes. And we have to recognize one thing. For knowledge, facts are one facet, which is all these books, etc. The other is the process of once you acquire the knowledge, how do you extend it and how do you put it into practice? That is what is to be taught in the classrooms. Now, knowledge is, for example, available. You can, if you want to learn linear algebra, you can get the best course delivered by the topmost person in the world. It's available on your desktop, wherever you are, or on your mobile phone. So availability of facts, factual knowledge is one part of the thing. But then the other one is the process of generating new knowledge out of it and interpreting that, etc. That is what is to be taught in classrooms. And once the fact knowledge base is ready, that we can concentrate on that, and that's how I visualize. So in that sense, there will be no restriction on they have to write in a certain medium. This medium will go. So I can come, join Delhi University, answer the question paper in Kannada and go. Because earlier it was very difficult, but now to evaluate a Kannada manuscript, you don't have too much of problems. You can put it on the net, ask somebody in Karnataka to evaluate it, and be done with it. So what is this medium going to do? So in that I visualize. In 2047, all these language debates will go. You can learn in whatever language you are comfortable with and answer questions in whatever language you are comfortable with. And because what is to be tested is your knowledge of the whatever material you are studying. If you are in electrical engineering, if you are in electrical engineering knowledge, history knowledge. So language will go out of the window on the knowledge system.